On the afternoon of February 21st, 1965, hundreds of people are heading to the Audubon Ballroom in New York to attend a gathering that will mark the history of the United States. It is 3:00 p.m. and everyone has come to listen to a man, an icon of African American rights. Malcolm X steps onto the stage in front of more than 400 people. This assembly is intended to introduce his movement, the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In the hall are his close associates, his wife, and his children. Malcolm then begins his speech with his traditional greeting, but suddenly, two young black men seated in the center of the room stand up and start arguing. One of them shouts, "Get your hand out of my pocket!" Malcolm, surprised, asks them several times to calm down. And that's when everything changes. Another man, this time seated in the middle of the front row, climbs onto the stage and suddenly pulls out a sawed-off shotgun from under his coat. He then aims at Malcolm and fires. Several small lead pellets from the shotgun shell are projected toward Malcolm's torso. According to autopsy reports, between 6 and 7 lead pellets hit his chest. This attack will cause the most damage. Due to the force of the impact, Malcolm is thrown backwards and crashes onto the floor. As he collapses, the two other assailants who had previously created the diversion rush toward him and also open fire, one with a .45 caliber pistol and the other with a Luger. In the confusion that follows the shooting, one of the two men, the one who had used the .45 caliber pistol, tries to flee through one of the exits of the hall. A member of Malcolm's security team then shoots him in the left thigh, immobilizing him and causing him to fall to the ground. As he falls, the shooter drops his weapon, his .45 caliber pistol, and is pinned to the ground, beaten by the crowd, then handed over to law enforcement. However, the two other shooters manage to escape from the hall by taking advantage of the general panic. One escapes through one of the side exits, while the other manages to flee through the back of the women's lounge without being stopped. Malcolm's body is subsequently taken to the hospital, where his death is announced. In total, about 21 bullets hit him, mainly in his chest and arms. Recapping everything we know so far, 3 people shot Malcolm X. 2 managed to escape, and the third person was arrested by one of Malcolm's security agents and handed over to law enforcement. The arrested suspect is named Thomas Hagan, a former member of the Nation of Islam, the organization in which Malcolm X had once been active. Although he refused to say who his accomplices were, witnesses nevertheless gave the police sufficient descriptions to lead to the arrest of 2 people, Muhammad Abdulaziz and Khalil Islam, both also members of the Nation of Islam. Given his arrest on the spot, Thomas Hagan pleaded guilty but maintained that neither Aziz nor Khalil were involved in the assassination of Malcolm X. For decades, Aziz and Khalil always proclaimed their innocence, supported by witnesses close to Malcolm X. Nevertheless, the 3 men were sentenced to life imprisonment after a joint trial. In 2021, after many years of fighting to prove their innocence, Muhammad Abdulaziz and Khalil Islam were exonerated, revealing that crucial elements of the investigation had been ignored or concealed. Indeed, several testimonies and pieces of evidence were hidden, and inconsistencies in the security arrangements of that 25th of February only fueled doubts. For example, on the day of the assassination, police presence was unusually reduced outside the Audubon Ballroom. Normally, nearly 24 officers are requisitioned, but that day, according to testimonies, only 2 police officers were on site. Another dark aspect of this case is the enigmatic disappearance of the Luger pistol. As we know, 3 weapons were used during the assault. First, the sawed-off shotgun, which did the most damage, loaded with 12-gauge shells. Followed by the Colt M1911, used by Thomas Hagan, equipped with .45 caliber bullets. And finally, the infamous Luger pistol, firing 9mm bullets, which was found after the attack and requisitioned by the police. The problem is that it mysteriously disappeared from the evidence and was never mentioned in subsequent NYPD reports. These missing elements and the questions they create raise a crucial issue. Why did so many people want Malcolm X dead to the point of assassinating him? The story of Malcolm X really begins in 1946, when he is incarcerated at the age of 21 for a burglary. In jail, he discovers the Nation of Islam, a religious movement advocating the superiority of blacks and the complete rejection of whites, led by Elijah Muhammad. In 1952, upon his release from the penitentiary, Malcolm, thanks to his charisma and eloquence, quickly becomes one of the most influential spokesmen of the organization. Over time, his relationship with Elijah Muhammad deteriorates until his departure from the group. In 1964, he thus founds his own movement, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, OAAU, based on more inclusive and less radical ideas. He does not describe his movement as non-violent, but as peaceful, while reserving the right to defense in case of attack. Malcolm becomes increasingly influential, and the FBI considers him a threat. Malcolm is then seen as a traitor by the Nation of Islam, and its leader, Elijah Muhammad, wants him dead. As proof, this FBI document recounts a telephone conversation between him and a leader of the Boston Mosque.
The only way to stop him was to get rid of him, the way Moses and the others did their bad ones. With these hypocrites, when you find them, cut their heads off.
In addition, a week before his death, 3 bombs are thrown at his house in Queens, triggering a fire while he and his family are inside. No one is injured, but this event marks a turning point in Malcolm's life, who considers himself a dead man. The night before his assassination, Malcolm stays at the Hilton Hotel in New York under a pseudonym. Devastated by the arson, he takes a sedative and falls asleep. His rest is, however, interrupted by the loud ringing of the telephone. "Wake up, Mr. Small," says the caller before hanging up. This call is worrying because only his wife and 2 close collaborators knew where Malcolm planned to stay that night. Despite everything, Malcolm still goes to the fateful gathering at the Audubon Ballroom, where he will be assassinated a few hours later. Just like the Nation of Islam, the FBI also considers Malcolm a threat. And this letter sent to J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, testifies to the concern shared by some citizens.
Dear Mr. Hoover, are we doing anything to curb the activities of the black Muslim leader, Malcolm X? Aren't his ideas somewhat on a parallel with those of Adolf Hitler? Why isn't this hateful man stopped now before it's too late?
In truth, the FBI had already begun to monitor Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam since 1950 through its COINTELPRO program. The objective of the program was to prevent the coalition of militant black nationalist groups by destroying them from within, and especially to prevent the rise of a messiah figure, a role that Malcolm was beginning to embody at that time. How did the FBI go about trying to dismantle his movement? Get ready, because this is where it gets interesting. And this modus operandi is actually what allowed the FBI to eliminate several similar groups. The first strategy consists of creating dissensions within the group, here between the Nation of Islam and Malcolm. In this declassified FBI document, we discover that factional disputes between the Nation of Islam and Malcolm had been created by the FBI. The division discussed earlier did not occur by chance, but was deliberately influenced by the FBI to discredit the movement in the eyes of the black population. We thus enter into the second strategy used by the FBI to bring down its enemies, wiretapping. Due to his break with the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X conducted most of his activities from his home, which aroused the FBI's interest in monitoring his actions. According to COINTELPRO documents, we now know that Malcolm had been wiretapped since March 1964, when he founded his own organization, the Muslim Mosque, INCO. The FBI wanted to monitor the creation and program of this new organization, fearing that it would become a source of problems.
I recommend that authority be granted to install a technical surveillance at the residence of Malcolm X, or at any address to which he may move in the future,
wrote J. Edgar Hoover to the Attorney General to authorize the wiretap. In addition to telephone wiretapping, the FBI infiltrated Malcolm's entourage, notably with Gene Roberts, a member of his close security. His mission was to monitor Malcolm X and report his activities to the FBI and the New York Police Department. Although he was present during the assassination of Malcolm, Roberts was unable to prevent the attack. He later acknowledged in an interview having been aware of the threats against Malcolm, but his role as an infiltrator prevented him from intervening. Another infiltrated agent was Detective Raymond Wood, whose objective was to encourage leaders and members of civil rights groups to commit criminal acts. According to his posthumous letter, his superiors within the New York Police Department involved him in a plot to blow up the Statue of Liberty, which led to the arrest of 2 key members of Malcolm's security team.
It was my assignment to draw the 2 men into a felonious federal crime so that they could be arrested by the FBI and kept away from managing Malcolm X Audubon ballroom door security on February 21st, 1965.
In 2021, 2 of the 3 men convicted for the assassination of Malcolm X, Khalil Islam and Muhammad Abdul Aziz, were exonerated after crucial evidence was revealed after being concealed for decades, proving that they were not present during the assassination. Hagen had indicated that there were actually 5 people involved in the assassination, but the police never took his testimony into account and always promoted the version of 3 suspects. Eyewitnesses confirmed that there were indeed several shooters, and an FBI report mentions 4 armed men shooting at Malcolm X. Additionally, newspapers and testimonies also mention that after the attack, 2 men were immediately arrested, but the identity of the second individual, who was never tried, remains a mystery. Some suggest that he may have been an infiltrated agent who was quietly released. These revelations, combined with the involvement of infiltrated agents like Raymond Wood, show that police and federal forces not only influenced the investigation, but may have allowed the assassination of Malcolm X. As we have seen previously, the review of the trial of Muhammad Abdul Aziz and Khalil Islam led to the revelation of crucial evidence long concealed by the FBI. Contrary to the initial account, the involvement of at least 4 people is now confirmed, although Hagen mentions the participation of a 5th person. The individuals involved were all members of the Nation of Islam. There was Hagen himself, Leon Davis, William X, and finally, Wilbur. Regarding their exact positions during the assassination, here's what we know. Thomas Hagen and Leon Davis were seated in the front row on the center left side of the hall. Right behind them was William X in the second row. And finally, at the very back of the hall, Wilbur was tasked with creating a diversion to distract security. Contrary to what was believed for a long time, it was not Hagen who initiated the diversion. His main role was to shoot with a Colt .45 pistol, while Davis held the shotgun that dealt the fatal blow to Malcolm X. William is strongly suspected of having used the Luger pistol. It is now established, thanks to evidence and testimonies, that the Nation of Islam is responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X. However, limiting ourselves to this conclusion would neglect the crucial role of the FBI in this affair. Many pieces of evidence suggest that the FBI seemed informed of this assassination plot. The fact that they did not intervene continues to fuel theories.